Even the most honest of all tournament fishermen will still have situations that come up which will allow them to bend the rules. Good morning, guys and gals. Let's take a look at our catch of the day for February 9. February 9 comes from 1 Corinthians 10:13. 1 Corinthians 10:13. The only temptation that has come to you is that which everyone has. But you can trust God, who will not permit you to be tempted more than you can stand. So the temptations that you have, the temptations that I have, everybody has. But you can trust God that you'll never be tempted any more than you can stand. So that means that, well, it means we can get away from it. We can get away from all those temptations. Even the most honest of all tournament fishermen will still have situations that come up which will allow them to bend the rules. These are temptations. I believe that temptations come from the devil. I remember one tournament on Grand Lake there in Oklahoma, a BASS tournament, where I had a couple of big bass found on the bed in practice. And these fish were, one of them was about 6 pounds and the other one was about 4. They were both, is a really large male fish and a really large female fish. And when I went back there the first day of the tournament, and the water had muddied up and I couldn't see those fish. And I went and tied up to a dock and I kept fishing that spot knowing that the bass were still there, but I couldn't see them. Now, in tournament competition, you cannot snag a bass that you can see. If you're fishing a crankbait or something and you snag a bass in the side of the head or something, it's a legal catch because you can't see the fish. But if you can see the fish on a bed, you have to catch the fish, and the hook's got to be down in its mouth, not on the outside of its mouth, and you have to show your partner, or nowadays show your marshal, that that fish was hooked inside the mouth. And what that rule is there for is to keep people from snagging fish off the bed. Well, I couldn't see the fish, but I knew exactly where they were. And so I started fishing those fish and fishing for those fish, and I got a bite, and I missed it. And I kept fishing and fishing, so that bite told me that those fish were still there. And I'm fishing, and all of a sudden, I was using a little tube jig, with a little jig inside a tube. And all of a sudden, my bait started to swim away, and I set the hook, and I caught that large fish. The fish was over 6 pounds. And the water was muddy. It had muddied up from rains and stuff. I get the fish up to the boat, and it's just I got it up there, and I reached out, and I grabbed a hold of the fish, and I said, oh my gosh. I said, it's hooked outside the mouth. And I knew the rule, and because of that, it didn't even cross my mind to try to make up any excuses or do anything to cheat in that tournament. And I said, God, I cannot believe that. I can't believe that. It's hooked outside the mouth. So I unhooked it, and I raised it up and looked at it and turned the fish back. It's a 6 pound bass. And my partner said, well, Jimmy, you couldn't see the fish. I said, yeah, but I knew it was there. I snagged the fish. It was on the bed. I knew. And so I turned it back. And he said, I don't think you had to turn that fish back. I don't think you had to. And so I said, well, it was really the right thing to do. And never really thought much about it other than I never did catch the other fish. And I get into the weigh-in, and I was telling the story to the tournament director, and he said, Jimmy, could you see the fish? And I said, no, I could not see the fish. He said, you didn't have to turn the fish back. And I missed the money in that tournament. I did not make the money. That fish would have put me up in the top 20. And that was just the difference between that 6 pound fish and probably 1.5 pounds. It was the smallest fish I weighed in that day. So I was doing things right, and it still turned out like old Stony Brook used to say, that old cowboy, like a kick in the head. But the main thing was I did what I thought was right. And that story probably doesn't even fit in here because I really wasn't tempted to do it any other way. We're told that everyone is attacked by these temptations. But as children of God, we've always got a way out. The way out can come in many forms, but I believe the simplest way out is simply prayer. That's right. When you're tempted, start praying. Start talking to God. And when you're tempted. When you say, is anybody looking? Don't say, is anybody looking? Start praying. No matter how attractive the devil makes temptations look, don't forget or neglect to pray your way out of it. Simply pray your way out of that temptation. And ask God to show you the way And according to his promise, right here in 1 Corinthians, he will. Here's our tip for the day. Tip your Roadrunner with a live minnow when fishing gets really, really tough. If you're fishing a crappie jig or a Roadrunner, and you're really having a hard time getting a bite, the fish are not biting very well, if you will tip that Roadrunner with a live minnow, it will multiply your chances of being able to catch a fish. And if you're going to do that, don't hook that minnow in the tail. Hook the minnow right down below the lip and right out through the top of his head. So it's just right up through, so he's got complete freedom of action right there. Doesn't even have to be very alive. But that's the way you want to hook a minnow. Now, I know some of you are thinking, oh my gosh, you want to put a minnow on a Roadrunner. We're not allowed to do that in tournaments, obviously, but you put a minnow on a Roadrunner. Does that hurt the minnow? No, they're cold-blooded. It doesn't hurt them. They can't feel a thing. And besides that, they're fixing to get eaten by a big crappie or a bass anyway. So that's a real good tip. So temptations this week, if you get tempted by something happens and you get tempted where you can make more money, where you can have a better situation, where you can have something come out, where you might tell a little white lie and you end up better in the situation, and you think, ooh, this is wrong. Start talking to God. Pray your way out of it. Hey, girls and girls, go out there and have you a great one today. I love you.